beautiful driving through here. The trees are just so green, and just it's been a few showers of rain, so they're just looking really fresh, quite spectacular.
We're just on our way to Port Arthur. Can't be far away now.
About 3 kilometres. So we're just pulling into the Port Arthur historic site. I'm a bit ambivalent about going there. I took my mum and Beck there in about 1987. It was about 12 months after the tragedies down here. It was very fresh back then.
The destination is on your right. Port Arthur historic site. Arrived.
From 1833 until 1877, Port Arthur was the destination for those deemed the most hardened of convicted British criminals, and for those who had reoffended after their arrival in Australia. Port Arthur had some of the strictest security measures in the British penal system. The peninsula on which Port Arthur is located is a naturally secure site, being surrounded by water, which the administration of the time claimed to be shark infested. The 30-metre wide Isthmus of Eaglehawk Neck was the only connection to the mainland, and that was fenced and guarded by soldiers, man-traps and half-starved dogs.
And we didn't actually take any footage because
We went on the Marana.
the boat was pretty crowded, and there she is, taking on the next load of people.
Went out around, what is it? Dead Island, what's it called?
Isle of the Dead.
Isle of the Dead.
And something else that's much harder to pronounce.
I didn't see that because I was lined up getting coffees
Yeah,
and an egg and bacon quiche.
you don't have everything.
The tourist experience is based around convicts' personal experiences. Each visitor is issued with a card which they use to seek out and explore a particular convict's story. Accommodating more than 250,000 visitors every year, the sheer number of tourists poking around every corner of the site makes it difficult to reimagine Marcus Clarke's popular novel For the Term of His Natural Life, written in the 1800s about Port Arthur.
You there! Hello, these people. Shut up, you dingo. That's why the accident.
Port Arthur was based on changed thinking on prisoner reform, a shift from physical punishment to psychological punishment. The hard corporal punishments such as whippings used in other penal stations was thought to only serve to harden criminals and did nothing to turn them from their immoral ways. New thinking was a stick and carrot approach. Difficult prisoners were separated out for up to 3 weeks in total isolation and total silence, existing on bread and water with 1 hour a day exercise, giving them the ability to contemplate their redemption. Critics of the new system noted that this seemed to have negligible impact on reformation, let alone its impact on the prisoner's mental health. The other side of the coin was that better behaved prisoners, although worked hard, enjoyed better conditions in the penitentiary section, and life at the time was no picnic for many in the Industrial Revolution cities of Great Britain. Also, there was a possibility of learning trades and becoming a free man to make a new life in the growing colonies. Over the years of its operation, 12,500 prisoners were held at Port Arthur. Nearly 1,800 were buried in unmarked graves on the Isle of the Dead. But there is little information on how many were released back into society. Other than those who lived out the last of their lives in these wretched conditions, or who went on to other institutions when Port Arthur was finally closed in 1877, there is another tragedy that's associated with the site. These particular gardens commemorate the infamous Port Arthur massacre of 1996, one of history's deadliest mass shootings by a lone gunman who is currently serving 35 life sentences in solitary confinement. The Broad Arrow Cafe was never reopened and mostly demolished. On our way back out, we look back at the sheltered cove, the broad expanse of green lawn rising to the manicured formal gardens, the ruins of the church at the end of a driveway flanked by mature oaks. The buildings, mostly in ruins, yet they possess a beauty and dignity that transcends its history as a place of incarceration, brutality, and despair. The word idyllic comes to mind, notwithstanding the tragedies that have played out here and transcending the plague of tourists.
So we're just at the Tasman Peninsula. We're camping at Lime Bay Reserve Park. We've left camp. We had a sprinkle of rain there just as we were leaving. We've only come a couple of kilometres. We're walking into Incline Plain coal mine to have a look. It's about 20 to 9 in the morning. It's really quiet here except for us, our footsteps, a few birds in the trees, such a smell of unpolluted freshness.
Scattered beside the tranquil waters of Little Norfolk Bay, the CoalMines historic site contains a collection of ruins that tell the story of convict establishment and a penal colliery that operated from 1833 to 48. It's one of several probation stations established on Tasman Peninsula to exploit natural resources and provide for the reform of convicts through hard labour in a secure and isolated landscape. At its peak, it held up to 500 convicts, as well as officers, guards and their families. That's all right. Here's the main shaft, and then we'll lower it up and down into the coal diggings. Mines give an insight into the use of convicts as a cheap source of labour for the exploitation of local resources. The mine shafts are now just circular depressions in the landscape, and 18 damp, dark, alternating solitary cells convey the grim harshness of Australia's convict history. This plaque reads, "Having had full evidence of the deeds in the darkness perpetuated in the mines, I contemplated the naked figures, faintly perceptible in the gloom, with feelings of horror." And this is the main settlement where the convicts were housed and the administration took place, just down this track here. Coal for kitchens and drawing rooms, coal that crackled and spat, cinders on carpets and crinolines, sparks on the hearthside cat. Far from the warmth of the parlour, deep in the gloomy hole, down on their knees in the darkness, convicts hacked out the coal. A ditty from the Times that indicates, although the coal was a necessity, maybe the quality from this mine was a little questionable. The convicts worked in the low, hot, damp tunnels of the mines, most of them towing the coal to the shafts, where it was hoisted out, put on ships.
And this is what's left of the main barracks, punishment shelf, and administration sort of buildings.
Given that we were the only visitors at the time, the tourist experience was totally different here than it was at Port Arthur. The sound of the birds and the breeze in the trees emphasised the lack of human noise, the loneliness of the site. You had time to contemplate the plight of the convicts, the isolation of their keepers, and the difficulties faced just to exist in the colonial era at the beginnings of Australian society.
Looking out over the sea. Pretty much it's been fairly distressing. For the convicts being able to see freedom so close. Lower ground floor is mostly the punishment cells.
When they were allowed out for an hour a day, those in the punishment cells had to wear sacks over the top of their head so they couldn't communicate in any way with anybody else. The guards wore no boots so they could hear if the convicts were whispering in the cells.
Pretty dank in here. It's the central square where the convicts were assembled for the day's work. And up here are the remains of the administrative buildings. And these are the isolation cells.
Are they or just normal cells?
I think it said on the tag up the top.
The site also had an important role in the anti-transportation debate. The station was infamous for its immoral activities, which was used as a means of swaying the British public opinion against the further transportation of convicts to Van Diemen's Land. Coal mines were officially closed as a probation station in 1848 on moral and financial grounds, although the mines continued to be worked privately up until 1877. We hope you liked our video on convict sites on the Tasman Peninsula. If you did, hit the button below and follow us as well.